What's up, people? How you doing? It's me. We're here. Let's talk for a bit. I actually had a really funny experience a few minutes ago. It's funny what you see when you're out around this time when the sun is down. It really is a different world. I caught something in my peripherals, and I thought at first that it was a cat. It was cloaked in shadow, and it was ahead of me. And it was basically the size of a cat, but I swear this thing then turns and crosses in front of me again in the distance, and I swear its size doubles. Then it starts to look more like a dog, and I don't really get scared anymore of these things. So I just kind of I'm curious, right? So it darts into a parking lot, and I'm kind of walking closer into the parking lot trying to see exactly what it is. And I swear to you, I think it was, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't a cat and it wasn't a dog. And the way it kept trying to stay in the dark, whatever it was, it could only maintain that outward illusion, that shadow of, I guess, a dog at that point, because it did not want to get in the light. It kept backing, And I was like, oh, that's curious. What are you, sir, ma'am, or it? Anyway, neither here nor there. Or is it all of the above? Actually, I got a really cool comment on one of my previous videos. It was on one of my Credo Mutua videos. And I always love good comments. I always love people who, who say things that make you think. Who actually have something really insightful to say. I always love those. And I'm paraphrasing. First of all, the person's name is Epiphany Villa. I think that's their name. Shout out. But no, they mentioned about basically roughly estimation of what the comment was basically, think about it. If these beings are so powerful, they're so advanced technologically, they're building pyramids and traveling across space and all this bullshit, why do they need humans to do their shit? This is and this isn't a what if, this isn't a this isn't something that makes me possibilities, let me consider it. I felt this way for a while. This is one of the biggest plot holes in that whole Anunnaki theorem. I'm not saying that specific entities don't exist, because they do, but that whole story, that whole narrative that Zecharia Sitchin put forward, a lot of that was propaganda. Propaganda partially to seeding the landscape, seeding the mental landscape for an eventual double back. That whole idea, they were our gods, they created us, we were nothing but lowly monkeys, and they came down and benefited us with their divine genes, and blah blah blah, bullshit. So they can come back later and say that, because it was fringe in the beginning, but notice how that particular narrative is essentially every other episode of Ancient Aliens. And again, we double back to why. You're traveling across the cosmos, and let me get this straight, you need gold, okay? So your plan, because and this is a stupid thing in two parts, right? First, you're telling me that the Anunnaki weren't rocking with autonomous machines, tech. I mean, shit, we have stuff like that now that we use to dig and to mine, and we're nowhere near what they were described. They didn't have that. You get what I'm saying? Also, you had the Agigi that were described. Now, according to Zechariah, according to other Sumerian adjacent texts, the Agigi supposedly rebelled, right? Which, that's not hard to understand. That's not hard to take into consideration, you know? You're like traveling with a slave race, and they're suddenly like, nah, dude, we're not going to do that. But again, you're telling me they couldn't have built robots, automatons, they couldn't have done... Your plan was to find some monkey people, you know, and then pull a whole island of Dr. Moreau. And not only like start, you know, cross breeding and doing all this bullshit, supposedly, you know, all this trial and error genetically, like the time. Come on, that wasn't overnight. That would have taken some time. But that's the story, right? You know, again, aside from the narrative of these were our gods, it also is that thing that just it's meant to make you feel less than as a person. Like you really weren't anything, because you got, on one hand, you got Genesis that's telling us that God literally blew in, you know, to a golem's nose and created the first human, you know, dirt man, yet he has the breath of life in him. And the other one saying, no, you were just a slave monkey. And it's interesting. Anyway, so that is really funny. It's a big plot hole because none of it makes any sense as far as the Anunnaki theorem goes. You know, in my own experience, I've seen entities that were like, I mean, take what I say, you know, or don't, but I mean, I've seen things that like, they were like metal creatures. They would come together and like disassemble, you know, like think of like that entity from, remember Gort from The Day the Earth Stood Still? Yeah, like that, you know. I saw beings rocking with those things, and those things weren't like alive in that sense. They were used as like helpers. So what's really going on? And I'm sorry, humans, like, do you know how many humans it would take to mine to a massive gold operation? Like, we've seen comparable situations in history. Like, that's a lot. It's a lot. And yet, these beings supposedly needed so much gold. They needed enough gold to coat their planet's atmosphere. That's a lot of gold, man. Anyway, so long way of answering that comment, that because I thought it was too good, I figured I'd answer it in a video. No, I think that whole story is stupid. And I think that there's more going on. Personally, I feel that the gold, the, you know, renewable resource that they're so obsessed with is us. That's what's being cultivated, marketed, fed upon. That's what the industry is built on. Us. Not saying gold is not an important material. Gold can be transmuted into a metamaterial. That's what nobody talks about. There are materials here on this planet that, when treated a specific way, they become metamaterials, and they can have properties that extend into a multidimensional capacity. Again, gold is one of those things. I talked about that before. If you want to see how gold really works, watch the movie Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Not talking about the old Power Rangers from the 90s. They made a movie in 2017. Watch that movie. The bad guy, she's looking for gold. And she uses gold and she manipulates gold to do certain things. That's how gold works. When it's manipulated by the right hands. Which goes all the way back to Nicholas Flamel, the Count of Saint Germain, the Philosopher's Stone, led into gold, alchemy. Nothing comes from nothing, people. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys soon. Take it easy. Be kind to each other. Enjoy life. Bye.